The last time my son brought me white roses, it was at his father's funeral. This time, he showed up at my door with the same flowers, while begging me for $50, 000. What he didn't know was that his homeless mother was now living in a mansion worth more than his, and sitting on $3 million. That's when I decided it was time for him to learn what betrayal really costs. 6 months ago, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. My name is Maggie Sullivan. I'm 64, a retired elementary school teacher from Ohio. After 30 years in the classroom and 35 years of marriage to my late husband Tom, I finally had the life I'd worked for, a cozy home in Westerville, a pension that covered the bills, and a son who seemed devoted. David, my only child, called me twice a week, came for Sunday dinners, even fixed the porch step without being asked. His wife, Vanessa, smiled sweetly, brought desserts, and spoke with the kind of gentle concern every mother dreams of hearing from her daughter-in-law. "Mom, you're getting older," David said one night over pot roast. "What if something happens to you in this big house? What if you fall down the stairs?" Vanessa nodded, her voice soft as a lullaby. "We just worry about you, Maggie. Maybe we could move in and help with everything. You'd never be alone." It sounded like love. It looked like family. And when David leaned forward and added, "To make it official, we should probably put the deed in my name. That way there won't be legal issues if anything happens." My tired heart believed him. I wanted to think my son was protecting me, not plotting against me. So I signed. I handed over the house Tom and I had paid off after 30 years. And for 6 weeks, it felt like I'd made the right choice. The lawn was cared for, meals were shared, laughter returned to the halls. For 6 weeks, I believed my son still loved me. But fairy tales don't last, especially when they're written in disappearing ink. The first crack came on a sweltering August afternoon. Passing Tom's old study, I overheard David on the phone. "Yeah, the deed transfer went through last month. Once we get her moved out, we can renovate the upstairs and probably get $750, 000 for it." My knees nearly buckled. Moved out? He wasn't protecting me. He was planning my eviction. That night, as I sat in the dark of my own bedroom, I realized the truth. My only child had just stolen the home where I raised him. 2 weeks after my son locked me out of my own home, I was sleeping in my Honda Civic behind a Denny's. My back ached, my hair smelled like stale coffee, and the shame of invisibility was heavier than any blanket. That's when an email appeared in my inbox. Subject line, "Maggie, your brother Bobby." I hadn't spoken to my brother in years. But the next day, there he was, waiting for me in a hotel lobby in downtown Columbus. Bobby wasn't the scrawny kid I remembered. He was a silver-haired real estate mogul, sharp suit, expensive cologne, and eyes burning with fury. "What has that little bastard done to you?" he whispered when he hugged me. And right there in the middle of marble floors and chandeliers, I broke down. When I finished telling him everything, Bobby slid 2 envelopes across the table. One held a deed to a house in Upper Arlington, 3 bedrooms, marble fireplace, garden out back. The other, a cashier's check for $3 million. "I never had kids," Bobby said, "and I'd rather give it to you while I'm alive. But more importantly, no one steals from a Sullivan, not even your son." For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. Within days, I was standing in a kitchen that belonged on the cover of a design magazine, while David and Vanessa tore apart my old home. Convinced I was rotting away in assisted living, I was sitting in a leather chair across from a wealth manager who told me I could live on $200, 000 a year, without touching the principal. That was when the teacher in me woke up. David thought he had played the perfect con, but teachers are good at long-term planning. So I began building my lesson plan, this time for my son. I hired Patricia Reynolds, a private investigator with a reputation for exposing financial fraud. I called my old lawyer, Harold Weinstein, to quietly review the deed transfer. And while they dug into David's paperwork, I played my part. At church and the library, I let whispers spread that I was adjusting to assisted living. I smiled sadly, never correcting people when they repeated David's lies about my memory issues. Let him write his perfect script. Let the town believe he was a dutiful son. Because behind the curtain, I was rehearsing Act 2 of my play. And soon enough, David would discover that his supposedly helpless mother wasn't helpless at all. She was watching, waiting, and she was about to strike. Patricia called me on a Saturday morning, her voice calm but carrying dynamite. "Maggie, your son isn't just greedy. He's criminal. Bank fraud, forged signatures, identity theft, over $200,000 in debt under your name. If you take this to the feds, we're talking 15-20 years in federal prison." I sat frozen, the phone pressed against my ear. My son hadn't just stolen my house. He had been systematically erasing me, one forged document at a time. By the time David finally reached out, his voice shaky, asking me for just a small loan, maybe $50,000 to get through the renovation, I was ready. I invited him over. He arrived with white roses, the same flowers he'd carried at his father's funeral. His face was pale, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights. He stepped into my new living room and stopped cold. The marble fireplace, the chandelier, the Persian rug, nothing looked like assisted living. "Mom, what is this place?" he whispered. I let him spin in circles, his disbelief hanging heavy in the air before I spoke. "This, David, is where your homeless mother has been living, courtesy of your Uncle Bobby. He gave me this house and $3 million. The color drained from his face. $3 million. His voice cracked like a boy caught stealing candy. I sat down calmly and opened the manila folder Patricia had prepared. Page after page hit the coffee table, forged signatures, fraudulent income statements, credit cards, and my name. "You see, David," I said evenly, "I know everything. The $200,000 you stole, the fake construction loan, the unpermitted renovations, every crime you thought I'd never notice while you painted me as a senile old woman." The white roses slipped from his hands, scattering across my rug like snow. "Mom, please," he stammered. "I can explain." "No," I cut him off. "For once, you don't get to explain. You don't get to spin your lies. You don't get to decide the narrative. That's mine now." He collapsed onto the sofa, his head in his hands. The same son who once asked for bedtime stories was now facing the kind of ending no storybook ever warned him about. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. David wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was only sorry he'd been caught. David sat there, pale and trembling, the roses at his feet already wilting. His voice was hoarse, almost childlike. "Mom, what do you want from me?" I looked at him for a long moment. The man in front of me wasn't the boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard, or the teenager who stayed up late studying at the kitchen table. This was a stranger, one who had gambled my life away and expected me to clean up his losses. "What do I want?" I repeated, my voice steady. "I want you to live with the consequences you created." His shoulders sagged with momentary relief, as if he'd narrowly escaped prison. He didn't realize the truth. Prison might have been kinder. I stood and opened the front door. The November air swept in, cool and sharp. "I'm not calling the FBI, David. I'm not pressing charges, but I'm also not giving you a single cent. Not now, not ever." He blinked at me, stunned. "But if the house doesn't sell, Vanessa and we'll lose everything," I finished for him. "Just like you tried to make me lose everything. You locked your own mother out of her home. You told the world I was senile. You forged my name, stole my money, and buried me alive in your lies. Now you'll bury yourself in debt instead." He staggered to his feet, desperate, searching my face for some trace of the woman who used to forgive him. But that woman no longer existed. "Those are beautiful roses, David," I added softly, glancing down at the petals scattered on my rug. "White roses for new beginnings. Mine begins with freedom and $3 million. Yours begins with bankruptcy, ruin, and the knowledge that your mother lives better than you ever will." His lips moved. "Mom, I'm sorry," but the words rang hollow. He wasn't sorry he had betrayed me. He was sorry he had failed. I closed the door on him, locking it with a final click that echoed like a gavel. Through the window, I watched him walk back to his BMW, a car the bank would repossess soon enough, and drive away into the night. Then I picked up the roses, one by one, and dropped them into the trash. Justice had been served. Not in a courtroom, not with handcuffs, but in the silent, devastating collapse of a son who thought he'd destroyed his mother, only to discover she had built an empire without him. 6 months later, I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me in the mirror. My hair was neatly styled, my wardrobe crisp, my mornings filled with the scent of fresh coffee in a kitchen that belonged in a magazine. I joined a book club, started piano lessons, even booked my first trip to Italy. Life, for the first time in decades, was mine alone to shape. Every so often, I'd drive past my old neighborhood. The house where Tom and I raised our son now sat quiet, a foreclosure notice nailed to the door. Neighbors whispered about the disaster, how David and Vanessa had burned through every dollar, how the bank had repossessed their cars, how bankruptcy had swallowed them whole. I never stopped the car. I never knocked. I didn't need to. The lesson had already been written in bold letters across their ruined lives. Betrayal carries a price far heavier than money. Bobby called often, teasing me about becoming the millionaire school teacher. I'd laugh, but deep down I knew it wasn't about the money. It was about dignity, about taking back what my son thought he had stripped from me. When people ask how I survived, I tell them the truth. I refuse to let betrayal define my ending. Instead, I chose my own beginning. And sometimes that's the sweetest revenge of all.